Hello again. Let's not waste any time, shall we? This video will contain spoilers for Honkai Star Rail's 3.3 story quest. I'd be surprised if you clicked on it and didn't want spoilers, but I mean, to each their own. Let's begin. 3.3 shook things up in a massive way, and now some themes that were foggy before have become evidently clear. In this scene, Lygus wants us to leave. More specifically, he wants us to cease support for the Flame Chase journey. Even though he can't force us to, he makes it abundantly clear he'd very much like it if we ditched Amphoreus. But why is that? Why does he want us to do that? Why are we such a problem to him? He does say to Herta at the end of 3.2 that if she goes inside of Amphoreus, she'll unknowingly assist the release of a Lord Ravager, but we're in here just fine, so what gives? Well, let's look at some of the things we've done so far that might affect Lygus' judgment of us. The Trailblazer has taken the mantle of being the bearer of Ornyx's core flame, something the Flame Chasers don't have an alternative for if they wanted to complete the Flame Chase. We also constantly save people and change the outcomes of events by being here, typically using Mem's power. For example, we use Mem to alter the Nikador's chamber so that he can be defeated in 3.0, the very first patch of Amphoreus. And more recently, we assisted Casterus to succeeding her sister to become the next holder of Thanatos' core flame. We use Mem's abilities constantly to lift up rubble and allow his passage. Even in the most recent patch, we did that to escape. And similarly, Danheng holds the Flame Reaver back so he can't stop Finon. We're clearly making the difference in this timeline, and it feels like without the Trailblazer and Danheng, the Flame Chase never would have gotten this far. We are winning because we're here, so what would have happened if we weren't? So perhaps Lygus wants us to leave because we're actually going to cause the Flame Chasers to win. We're altering the timeline too much, and he, for some reason, does not want the Flame Chase journey to succeed. Is he trying to preserve the timeline so the Lord Ravager stuck inside of Amphoreus doesn't escape, or could it be something else? If you saw my previous video, you'd know that I believe that Amphoreus is a trap designed to keep the Lord Ravager stuck inside of it, an endless loop of timelines that the Ravager cannot escape from. But today, we don't need to assume more than simply that a time loop is present. If you're out of the loop on that, the gist is that Amphoreus is stuck in a time loop where the heroes lose over and over. Given Lygus' lines at the end of the 3.3 quest, he effectively confirms that all of these events have happened before, hence the line, "I can no longer remember how many times this has happened," and most importantly the line, "just like each cycle of the extrapolation, in accordance to their primordial design, ends here." This clearly refers to the events of Amphoreus as a cycle encased in an eon's design. This is related to Herta's lines, where she and Skrullum have discovered that Amphoreus is built upon the technology of a scepter, an erudition construct. With all of this, it becomes evident that it's not just a trap. Amphoreus is not just meant to keep the Lord Ravager here. Well, it is, but not forever. I believe the Lord Ravager is meant to be stuck in these loops until it eventually breaks out. They want it to become powerful enough to break out of this infinite series of timelines, this labyrinth that it can't escape. They're hoping that one day it will be so powerful, it just will, it'll find a way out. And then it should be unstoppable, you wouldn't be able to trap it, you wouldn't be able to contain it. In other words, Amphoreus is meant to be the birthing grounds for a new Lord Ravager. The most damning line for all of this is Lygus' speech about why he's in the vortex at the end of 3.3. It completely recontextualizes our perspective on what he says to Herta at 3.2. He's not afraid she'll unleash the Lord Ravager onto the universe. Lygus is afraid she will interrupt the process and unleash the Lord Ravager early. But wait, hold on. If that's the case, who's the Flame Reaver, right? Everyone says the Flame Reaver is Finon, for example, but if Finon is supposed to become the Lord Ravager, who is the Flame Reaver we see in the game if he's not the Lord Ravager yet? To answer this question, we need to look at Amphoreus as a whole. Amphoreus is described as the Garden of Recollection's secret stash of memories, as in, it's made entirely of memories from top to bottom. If this is true, then that means that everything we've seen in Amphoreus is not exactly real, but the equivalent of a simulation. Given that the Black Tide resembles a glitchy mess of shadowy darkness, and the emotes that appear when we find bugs around Amphoreus appear with a screen-like static. The developers aren't being exactly subtle about this idea. This has been a theory since 3.0 after all. What's new, though, is that we now know for certain that it actually is made entirely of memories. Why? Well, because Mem directly tells us. In this scene, the walls are becoming transparent. Several structures are losing form, turning into an odd blue static, where Mem tells us directly that the memories within the walls are fading, which finally hard confirms for us that the world around us in Amphoreus is indeed created from a collection of memories itself. It's not just the people, it's not just the events, it is the whole world. However, something I haven't seen anybody ask yet is, where did these memories come from? Where did they originate? Memories are not created from nothing in Star Rail. We see that in 3.1 when we have to collect memories from people around Akama so that Mem can take us to the past. But then where did they come from? I believe the answer to that question is the final puzzle piece, and we'll explain once and for all who the Flame Reaver actually is. The memories must come from somewhere, so how about a planet? A planet once known as Amphoreus, from long ago. A planet which went through similar events to what we see in the Amphoreus we know, a flame chase journey, complications, disagreements, and politics. However, the original Amphoreus did not have the Flame Reaver nor the Black Tide. It did, however, see one very important thing: the birth of a Lord Ravager, who would become known as the Sun Devourer. This Sun Devourer went on to extinguish stars for over 300 years, leaving inhabited planets to die out in the cold emptiness of space and be hunted by the Antimatter Legion. This part of the lore is established in the Nemesis file called Ruin Yavanna Chain, named after the star system that the Sun Devourer attacked. Over a third of the stars in the Yavanna Chain gone in a 300-year time period. After those 300 years, the Sun Devourer simply disappeared from any records. It is simply never mentioned again in any lore. That is, until Amphoreus, where we have the constant sun motif with Phynon and Flame Reaver, as well as the patch named For the Sun is Set to Die, being 3.4's title. If you ask me, it's pretty plainly spelling it out for us. This is where the memories come from. The original Amphoreus birthed a monster, a ravager of unparalleled destruction that committed what is known as one of the most appalling sins committed by the Antimatter Legion in-universe. This explains literally everything, but let's go one at a time. First, this explains where the memories come from, of course. The memories come from the original planet, an old Amphoreus, except now we're dealing with new threats. The Black Tide, the Flame Reaver, and we're here too. Wait, why are those things new exactly? How do we know those aren't from the original Amphoreus? Well, it's very simple. Those things are not creations from memory, they're real. When Herta visits Amphoreus, she spawns in the Vortex of Genesis, except there are no core flames present. Only Lygus stands there quietly in the room. There are, however, phantoms of the Trailblazer, Danhung, and Flame Reaver. And of course, Herta and Lygus are in the room too. What do all these things have in common exactly? Well, we know that the Trailblazer and Danhung are from Beyond the Sky, members of the Express. But Herta is from Beyond the Sky too. So is Lygus, clearly, as he is in the vortex that lacks the core flames. Clearly we are not in the actual vortex inside Amphoreus, at least the one we know. We're in some kind of room outside of the planet. So they all come from Beyond the Sky, so is the Flame Reaver also from Beyond the Sky? The Black Tide is constantly spoken about as being from Beyond the Sky, and the Flame Reaver is being said to have been directly tied to it. That means with the memories alone, there was no Flame Reaver, no Black Tide. They arrived here from outside and have changed the fate of Amphoreus in the process, but why are they here? Well, if somebody's running a simulation of Amphoreus using the collective memories from the original planet, and the goal of that simulation must be to create a new Sun Devourer, then surely the Flame Reaver's purpose of being here is related to that. And if that's true, we come back to our initial question, who is the Flame Reaver? Well, okay, maybe who isn't the right word, because it, has to be Phynon, right? It just has to be. We all see the hints, the motifs, the visuals. It simply must be Phynon at this point. So, how is that possible? Where the hell did this Phynon come from if he's from Beyond the Sky? So, what if it's not just any Phynon, but rather the original Phynon? The one from the original Amphoreus, the same Phynon who became the Sun Devourer in the real universe. He came here to stop this from happening again. He came here to end the cycle, to prevent the birth of a new Sun Devourer, because he knows what he did. He knows what happened and what he was capable of. And even though he's been reduced to a broken record, trying to destroy the simulation from the inside for God knows how long, he knows it has to be him to recreate the world, to end the cycle once and for all and thwart Lygus's plans. He knows all of this is fake. It's all a simulation to remake the events that led to the birth of a Lord Ravager. And if this is the case, he would have succeeded too, except we got involved. We changed fate. We kept the Flame Reaver busy so that Phynon could perform the rite, and because we intervened, he's lost. So the reason then that Lygus wants us to leave, even though our actions will directly lead to the birth of a new Lord Ravager, is that the plan to keep the Lord Ravager trapped here until they're powerful enough to break free simply isn't finished yet. We're accelerating the process too fast, and this Phynon simply isn't ready. All of these things are what naturally falls into place once you realize that Amphoreus is a collection of memories gathered from the original planet. I know this might all sound crazy, but really only two pieces of evidence are needed to solidify this. The phantoms that Herta sees when she enters the Vortex of Genesis are all from Beyond the Sky, and the fact that Amphoreus is made of memories. That's it. We're not making any huge logical leaps here, at least if you ask me. And with that, the rest is up to Hoyo on how this all plays out. If you ask me, I still think room theory is at least partially correct, and that we will travel to an alternate timeline, or perhaps loop back to the beginning of the loop before Phynon can fully break out. And this is how we'll meet Hysolins and Ceredra, for example, possibly even Celios if we're lucky. Mostly because I think that would be the most satisfying way to introduce these characters instead of just like a flashback sequence. If you have any questions or counterpoints, I'd love to hear about it, so please leave a comment and I'll be actively discussing all things Amphoreus with anyone who gives the time to ask. I appreciate you watching and thank you for your time.